So just a word about Barry and some of the initiatives that he's involved with in our firm. He's always been a forward thinker. Believe it or not, was talking about the kind of digital revolution that we're now seeing 20 years ago, and people thought he was a crazy man, literally. And it's almost all come to pass. So he is truly one of the country's forward thinkers when it comes to the digital world and the digital initiatives, and now runs his own digital consultancy, Open Matters. Started his career at McKinsey and became an entrepreneur, built and sold a bunch of different companies. Always an innovator, always a thoughtful intellect, always flying it at 300,000 feet when most of us are happy to be at 100 or 70 or so. Couple of things on the digital initiative. We're seeing it everywhere at Odgers, in literally every single industry. You pick up the annual report, JP Morgan. There's an article today about Jamie Dimon talking about how very real Silicon Valley is as a threat to JP Morgan. Now this is JP Morgan talking, and they're looking at the lending clubs and the various forms of lending that are bypassing traditional channels. And as a search firm, we're seeing this in the most unlikely of areas. You know, in the people who make things, make one, sell one. Things are being printed now that previously had to be manufactured and distributed, and it just goes on and on. Big data, cloud, mobile, social media, aspects of every part of your company and people's companies are being affected by what's going on. And I think this is indicative of the turnout. We've run similar events for the last 2 years. I think we broke 100 once. Iskander, who was helping me plan this event, kept coming in with a worried look on his face, like, Steve, there isn't going to be any place for people to go other than to come in and sit down and eat. I said, well, they'll come in and sit down and eat. So I hope you've enjoyed your food. Couple of words on some of the things that we're doing with Barry's company. Barry is on our advisory board. He's a digital advisor to Odgers Berndtson in the United States, and we have formed a joint venture to create something called the Digital Institute, digital initiative that we are pursuing in partnership with Wharton and with Open Matters. It's research-based. It's in a development form. It hopefully look a lot different in a year or two than it does now, but it has been launched. The book that you see in the blue book, the value multiplier that you see in the center of your table, is the curriculum guide for something called the digital boot camps that Barry runs, where he talks with companies in a day-long session about digital strategies, working with managements to kind of evoke a digital plan, a digital strategy. We do that with him, of course. And that copy of that book is on this USB that you were given as you came in. If you didn't get one, there are others on the way out. In addition, copies of our Observe magazine, which is a quarterly magazine that we produce. We've had a couple of digital issues. Those can either be downloaded and subscribed to electronically. They go on the iPad and of course on your computer. Or if you'd prefer to receive a hard copy, you can do that. And instructions on how to do all of that are on these little cards that are on your table. So feel free to take one, and it'll tell you how to find all this stuff and subscribe to it. And the book and some other materials, I think a couple of the issues are already on the USB. So without any sort of further, you didn't come to listen to me. I'm going to introduce Barry, who's going to take us through some of the research that he did with Deloitte and Wharton into all of the public companies in the United States going back to when they first went on the public markets, and draw from that some of the conclusions that he and Wharton were able to learn. It's very interesting, very provocative, and with no further comment, I'm going to introduce Barry.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Great. Can I get you all to stand up for a second? Sorry to interrupt your lunches. What I want you to do to begin the day, to begin our day, is to introduce yourself to the people at your table. But before you do it, there's a rule I want to engage in here. I want you to think about these people as customers you don't know and you don't care about. They're not going to buy anything from you today, likely. Therefore, you don't care about their names. You don't care where they live. You don't care who their family members are. You don't know anything about them. And when you get done, you don't have a big data organization that allows you to analyze their behaviors, their sentiment, or their engagement. Please say hello to the person next to you. And you're all cheating already. You're all cheating already. You can all take a seat. Thank you very much. Now, the reason I do that exercise is to remind us all that that is not how we greet our customers and our employees. And the facts are, quite clearly, we don't know any of them. There is very, very few companies that know us. In fact, let me hypothecate. Would any one of us truly give away all of our customers to a company that was started by my son's classmate in college, and then seek to rent them all back years later only after they achieved outsourcing 1.5 billion of us? What company is that? Facebook. Right? Imagine this. How would a company ever acquire 1.5 billion customers if there wasn't a huge opening for them to let us do something we've been seeking to do all along, which is to communicate with each other? So what they did was, unbeknownst to all of us as company leaders, we said, we're so focused on our products and our services and our people and our processes, we really won't pay attention to all these customers. We really won't let them communicate and talk to each other. We'll just let them be assembled by another company. And when they're really big and successful, we will rent them back. We will seek to take them back. And you see it regularly with the New York Times now struggling to get back their own subscriber base. So I want to make clear that I think today's conversation is really very simple and what the digital world has been about since as long as Steve has been trying to recruit me to asset-based companies, for which I've said no, which is, it is a chance for us all to connect profoundly with the people we like and love, right? Good example, this weekend I was in Key West and at a wedding, and my wife's niece, and all the family members there said, gee, I can't believe your younger son is doing one of those crazy things again. He's a rock climber, ice climber, surfer. He's down surfing in Costa Rica. And I said, God, you know what amazes me? I don't know what my son's doing, but everybody else does because he posts it on Facebook, right? They don't call home and say, Dad, I'm taking a trip. That's true about what is happening in the world. So what is digital? Now, anybody want to tell me their view of what digital means in their organization? Or what it could mean? And I'm not the only person in this room. Anybody want to try? No one's going to try. Come on. Say it again, please. Wow, I love that. A shot at boundarylessness, and you see people blow it up as well. That once you think in a boundaryless way, you can both exceed at it and you can miss it. Correct. Any other thoughts? Anybody else want to take a shot at what digital is? Right there. There's some. Go ahead. Digital, thank you very much. The ability to reach anybody, anywhere, at any time, on their terms, I presume, as well. On their terms. Someone else had a thought over here? Sure. On the same line. Communications channel. Anything else? Sure. Frictionless. Okay, there was a discussion between myself and you'll meet him, the chairman of the board of this organization, And what you see is there was, and just to put this in some context, In 1947, there was a Nobel Prize that was awarded called The Theory of the Firm to Stephen Coase from Harvard, C-O-A-S-E. And Stephen Coase's simple thesis was the reason the firm was created was to do nothing other than to reduce the friction for customers to receive products and services. That Nobel Prize, although the thesis was created in 1947, that Nobel Prize was awarded in 1991. Now, if we believe the internet and digital creates frictionless opportunities, then Jamie Dimon is right this morning, classmate of mine from Tufts, where I went to school with him, is peer-to-peer lending creates a frictionless environment in which ultimately Jamie and JP Morgan will find it difficult to compete. And that's in his own letter to his board and shareholders. Anybody else? Sure. Feedback. Fantastic. If you think about this, when you leave this room, it is very hard without digital, other than if you're all the call lodgers, to give us feedback. But in today's digital world, there's a variety of ways you can give feedback, right? You can share it online without even sharing it with us by posting a tweet. Or you can do something crazy, which we shouldn't forget. Hillary can announce for the first time her candidacy on social media as opposed to regular broadcast. And we shouldn't forget this. As much as I really wanted her previously, she didn't believe in social media 8 years ago. She had no social media accounts, nor did John McCain. They didn't believe in it. Anybody else? Go for it. Scalability, absolutely. And you can scale up and you can scale up easily, right? This content, if we were doing a simulcast, can be made available globally, and it's easy to scale it. Next thought. Anybody else? Sure, over there. Wow. It's the tangible representation of intangible human experiences. I have a REIT that's located here in Wall Street, $50 billion REIT that I advise the board and CEOs. What makes it so interesting to me about them, I met yesterday for a full-day digital boot camp with the board and the executive team, was they said the reverse. The digital is the physical representation of tangible activities, very similar, Jem, because they're realizing they have 1 million apartment units. They know nothing about those residents, nothing. They just know how many square feet each apartment is. But they're beginning to realize that if they knew the residents, if they knew something about them and the cohorts, they might, which is their mission, they might end the problem of housing in America. But they need a digital representation of that to understand what's happening to those people in those housing units. Go for it, yes. Digital is data, that's correct. So let's go back to the real estate example I gave you, or a Wall Street client I have, or a large Wall Street client. They don't have data other than on the transaction, and they surely have a lot of transaction data, but they have no real data on behavioral activities. They don't know me, right? They know I may have bought something or sold something, and they used to presume if I bought milk and diapers, maybe I have a child, right? It's interesting, it may not be accurately true. So big data allows you to put together things that you've never seen before, and Wall Street's doing this. They're using things like Twitter and Facebook feeds to influence and to advise them on future activities before the point of sale. Really interesting. Our influence and our impact before point of sale changes what people should buy and sell. Before we can keep going, you can see why I use this example of the elephant. There are so many places in the physical and digital world that digital begins to impact the business world. It's not just about social. Although I have 165,000 followers on Twitter, I only did that for one reason. My biggest client, Deloitte, I wanted to show them the power of what an individual could do, and I wanted to show them specifically with Best Buy. Best Buy didn't deliver our capabilities specifically for an event like this. I tweeted it. I agree, I have 165,000 followers, and immediately they opened up the store, and it shows you the power that feedback can give you, right? Okay, let's go on. So what's really interesting, it's not just digital that changes the world, it is the power of the network that changes the world. So right now, people think about digital as a means to an end. I would suggest one step further, that when you think about it, all of us have lived in isolation. Carl Jung said, that it's called collective unconsciousness. He wasn't suggesting that we were unconscious when he said collective unconsciousness. He was suggesting that our consciousness is limited to our individual experiences. So therefore, we were unconscious to other people's ways of being. It's now called mindfulness. But if you think about it, all we knew is what we knew. Now today, when we're all connected, our consciousness begins to expand. Right? I may not like or may not be a big fan of a particular sporting event. Like I'm not a Katy Perry fanatic, but it was hard to miss Katy Perry during the Super Bowl. It was tweeted by everybody, right? Flying around, swimming with whoever she's swimming with. It becomes part of our collective consciousness. And so now we don't need broadcast. We are the collective consciousness. We're wiring each other, whether we know this or not. And here's an important statistics. Genotypes, this is your basic genotype, you have 3 degrees of separation between your great-parent, great-grandparents, and yourself in terms of the impact. But here's the more important statistic. Phenotypes are equally important. Phenotypes are 3 degrees of separation away horizontally. No genetic connection. If I smoke, 3 degrees of separation away, they're likely to smoke. If I tweet 3 degrees of separation away, they'll know. I influence people in terms of their consciousness in the network through this. So if you think about your organizationally networked, you begin to think about the power of your organization as a global network. Most of my organizations still think about their organization from an in-source, outsource perspective. If I ask them to map their networks, either physically or digitally, they never think that way. But as you begin to think about the power of the network having collective power and collective consciousness, it changes the power of your business. That's what's made these new firms scale so fast. Because Silicon Valley has realized if you combine digital technology with a human network, the power of that business to scale is unbelievable. So let's just talk about what's happening here in terms of technology. We call it chasm, just so you can remember a simple word, cloud, right? Big data analytics, social, internet of everything, and mobile. Basically, there's 7.2 billion people in the world. 3 billion of them are connected, right? 2.5 billion of them are using some sort of social media. 3.6 billion are using mobile phones. 5.5 billion are using some larger sense of mobility, and 1.6 billion are on social media every day. How many times a day do you think you all check your phones? It never stops. That's a good one. Anybody have the number, though? Anybody want to guess the number? What's the over-under number? 75. That's an over-under number. Anybody want to say higher or lower? Higher. That's correct. Very close. About 200 times a day, you all check your phones. It's really quite spectacular, right? We don't think about it, but literally phones, if you look at the research, are a human appendage. I mean, seriously. This is what it looks like as we drive along at 60 miles an hour, right? We're listening to the phone, we're driving, taking everybody's world, life's a chance, and thinking, well, we're going to drive and text and talk at the same time, and think it's not a risk. It's just like an appendage, right? If you ask your kids, like I do those things ever get disconnected, right? And they're perfectly aligned. If you walk down the mall, men and women are walking like this. It's like their new handbag with their cell phone in front of them, right? They're navigating along, seeing who's texting them in a minute. This is our lives, right? We live connected to these devices. But here's the important point, that ultimately, getting to the top has changed. Asset-based companies were the winners. Today, technology companies are the winners, and asset-heavy companies are quickly dropping. The most admired companies are now the least valuable enterprises. And here's how you see it. 30 years ago, the great companies, this presentation is available. If it's not, we'll make sure we send it to you. The great companies were the top. If you had assets, Warren Buffett was right, you can invest in intrinsically valuable companies. But today, the companies that are leading are connecting us. And whether or not we believe or not, and whether or not accountants say we're not, we're intrinsically valuable. So today's valuable companies are the technology companies, the ones that digitally connect us and wire our wiring to them. So today you're seeing all these massive technologies. I'll give you an example. The GAFA4, Probably never heard of the GAFA 4. You've heard of the G8. Everybody's heard of the G8? Right? The GAFA 4, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon are worth almost the same as the G8. They have more customers than the G8. They have more in their treasury than the G8. They are not country limited. They are horizontal applications that connect every one of us, and they're growing exponentially. Apple will be the first trillion-dollar market cap company. And this is what happens with companies can't see around the corner. Right? Hertz rents cars all day long. It doesn't understand digital, doesn't understand that digital is basically changing friction. Zipcar comes along, Hertz doesn't see it. Ultimately, that and Avis has to pay big prices. AT&T doesn't understand it's not about minutes spent. Apple comes along and realizes it's a computer in a hand. Blockbusters, you get it, all of us. Netflix, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, the world is changing every 18 months. So here's the remembering in the message. The world is changing according to Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is every 18 months, the speed of technology doubles and the cost goes in half, which means there's a deflationary aspect to the world in which we live. So my argument is why we're not seeing inflation is because we all spend more and more on technology, which is bringing down the cost of everything. And so seeing around the corner is critical to your business. And it's not hard to see around the corner. It never has been. I've been arguing as long as I've known Steve when he tried to recruit me that the value resides in the human network, in the two words, humankind. It's the only kind I care about, the humankind. And all they had to do was wire us, and we would become powerful. It was no more complex than that in 1987. And so, let's look at the research that we did with Deloitte. Deloitte paid millions of dollars to figure this out with me, because they asked the same question, what's happening, Barry, for all of our clients? Well, here's what's happening. We looked at 40 years of publicly traded companies, about 14,000 of them, 6,000 have been publicly traded the whole time. What we found was companies had networks were worth 8 times more than companies that did not. 8 times more. And companies that were not networked, I'm talking about digital human networks, were worth 1 or 2 times revenues. And most companies are not networked. They don't want to be networked yet. They don't see the power of the network. They're constantly focused inwards, doing re-engineering, process improvement, people reviews. It's got nothing to do with today's world. Cool for Jim Champion, Michael Hammer, and Michael Porter. But those guys are old white men. Hey, sorry, old white men. I'm one of them. But that's not the right way to think about this anyway. It's just not. It's a very old-fashioned way to think about it. And so let's look what happened. How did we get here so fast? Well, simply, we grew up in a variety of ages, and every age shrinks, right? You got the agrarian age, then you got the industrial age, you got the services age. How many of you are born in the industrial age in terms of your businesses? How many have make things in your companies? How many of you are thing makers? Some of you are industrial companies. How many of you are services companies? Wait, how many of you are tech companies? And how many of you are network companies? So if you look at what happens, this room is a perfect representation, right? It doesn't have as much of the normal asset makers. Companies, regardless of when they were born, have inherited a set of genealogy or genealogy based on an age and time and place. But they presume that their genealogy and genealogy still represents their way of being. But it's not necessary. You can move up the next level of curves. And here's what happens if you don't. Investors have figured this out. 40 years ago, everybody invested in things, physical assets. Now they've all moved, we have all moved our capital. All of it has been moved, both as customers and investors, out of CapEx, out of infrastructure, into OpEx, into IPX, and into NetworkX. We are just shifting our monies, shifting our investments into these knowledge-based industries that are network-centric. Because we intuit what we've always known, that yes, Metcalfe was right, Metcalfe Law, if you put 1 fax, not connected, not valuable. 2 faxes connected to the internet, worth something. Bunch of faxes connected to the Ethernet, worth some more. He wasn't considering the fact that one day the Ethernet would turn into the internet, and maybe we're not faxes, we're humans. What happens is you get these 4 different business models. Lower left, thing makers. Lower right, services companies, right? They make things, sell things. Then Maytag man comes along. He services the things that people make. Interesting services, health services, educational services, investment banking services, search services. Interesting. Then you start building technology, which is what I think, not what I do. What I think is valuable. What I feel is valuable, not what I do is valuable. How I think and feel. Then networks come along, who I know and how I connect is even more valuable, right? And what happens is you see the numbers. This is what the research said. That this has nothing to do with industries, nothing. That thing makers, people who make one thing and sell one thing, including cars, they're not worth anything. Literally, my thing makers hate me. They're worth only the price of selling another car. They make a car, they sell a car, make another car, sell another car, make some more cars, sell another car. It's very interesting stuff, but no one cares. Drives me around, no one cares. In fact, the facts are right. I mean, there's no car makers that are worth a lot, even Porsche, right, Audi. Then you got the services companies, not worth any either. Make an hour, sell an hour, make another hour, sell another. It's cool stuff. Make 2,200 billable hours a year, sell 2,200 billable hours a year. Now let's move up. Above the digital divide. Technology comes along. I think something. I just think something. Conceptualize it. I turn it to ones and zeros. Infinitely scalable. Infinitely consumable. Make it once many people consume it. And then the network comes along. Anybody can think anything. Airbnb. Anybody can have anything. I don't need to build Starwoods or Marriott. Anybody can have a home, and they can register it as a hotelier. Anybody can have a cab. I don't have to have a cab company. I can be Uber. Anybody can do anything, and it's very empowering. It presumes, it's the counter presumption for corporate leaders. It presumes that people will do the right thing, and it lets people be people. Versus all my corporations think, gee, my people are going to be stupid. They're going to do crazy things. My customers don't know what they're doing. I have to tell them what to do, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So the first guy who figured this out was Apple. Here he's having a fight with Eric Schmidt, and he says to Eric Schmidt, you're stupid. And one guy's running Google, one guy's running Apple. You're crazy. He says, I'm going to create a computer for a person, not for companies. I'm not IBM, because if I give it to the individuals, it will infiltrate like an organism inside a company. Builds hardware. Then he starts building services, which is the most amazing services if you ever serve your Apple. You can register for an appointment on your schedule. Now, it'd be great when I want to do this with Delta Airlines. I want to fly. Can I schedule an appointment when I want to go? And will you call me when I'm ready to make that appointment versus dial 1, dial 9, dial 4, wait 20 minutes, right? Apple says, call you anytime you want. Completely antithetical thinking. Then he creates music business, right, that anybody can use, a network of music, any label. And then he realizes the power of the mobile phone is in the power of network. So he built only 5 apps. People don't realize this. Ultimately, he gets to 11 apps. And then he says, go to it. He creates an open API. And now he has nearly 1 million apps with 500,000 developers. How does Microsoft catch up? They can't, because they're still developing everything internally. And Apple says, go for it. Have a great time. Be a member of the network. Develop your own app for anything you want, whatever business you want. Like with my big REIT, we're going to develop an amazing app, right? An amazing app, mobile app for apartment dwellers. Cool stuff. Right? And every industry has all 4 business models. Most of the companies we know of occupy the lower left, GM, humbug, right? Really slow moving. My family started a GM agency here in Manhattan. Happens to be up in Westchester now. We must have sold 1 million cars since 1916. Do you think my family knows of one of those customers? Do you think GM knows any of their customers? Mako, services, right? On demand, cool, Uber, right? They're all in some places. And once again, no one's moving. We all know this as consumer, but what the research says is that most companies still stay exactly where they're at because the leaders don't have the gumption to move on. What's happening to them is the customers are forcing them into this new world. Customers are saying, I want to interact with my peers. Okay, so what do leaders look like? I've given you a little bit of research about business models. We also had to study leadership styles. We realized, okay, this is not just about the business models. I wanted to understand with Deloitte and Wharton, what were the different leadership styles, which was really critical to me because I knew that leaders were human. They had their own fears and their own aspirations, and they had to have their own approaches. So we found there were 4 types of leaders. The first leader, I got the gold, my way or the highway. When I fire you, it's not going to hurt. It's just business. Don't take it personally. Everybody ever heard that speech before? A few of you have heard that speech. There's another one of my favorite speeches. Keep your head down, take no risks, do no harm, and there's a good thing. If you take any risks, all good deeds will be fully punished. Absolutely. You try something out of the ordinary, we're going to punish you. We love innovation as long as you do exactly what I tell you what to do. So that was the first type of leader we found, and there were most of them out there. Then we found leaders like Steve Ballmer, a guy who can say after he's made $8 billion, I missed mobile. I missed the cloud, but I still made enough money to spend $2 billion buying a basketball team. Who cares, right? It's amazing to me how Microsoft could have missed it, right? Everyone, including him, was walking around with a mobile device, and he's saying, at Microsoft, we didn't see the mobile revolution. Luckily, there's people like Tony Hsieh, who I know well, from Zappos. Who uses Zappos? Well, here's a guy that says, I'm going to make shopping for women, shoes, fun. Now, I love my wife. You should see the amount of shoes that we have delivered and taken out every week. Comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out. I'm like, Ellen. She says, Barry, this is fantastic. I never enjoyed shoe shopping so much. I try in every type of thing I want, right? It's just fantastic. And if you're you can also be, if you want to know, a VP member. You can keep them for a year and try them if you want to. It's just spectacular how people change when you think happiness. And then you finally get to where Mark Zuckerberg is, right? Mark realizes it's all about you and you can have fun with it. And here's the 4 leadership styles. Commander, right? I have it my way. And then you find the other person as the co-creator. You know something? I don't know what to do. I really want to do it differently. I need your help. I'm going to co-create with you. Tell me what the economics look like. How do we share the economics? These are brand new types of leaders. How do you own what you've done? This is really cool stuff nowadays, right? Very empowering. So there are 4 steps that I want you all to take down that you can remember. Step 1. How do you get here? You have to tell a new story. Now, people think of this as strategy. I'm an ex-McKinsey guy, right? Seriously, who cares? Right? We can spend a lot of money doing a lot of strategy work, but you really have to tell a new story. And a new story is one of paradoxes. You have to tell a story which is opposite of your suffering. Oh, my business has slow growth, not much top line. I'm not worth 8 times revenues is my standard suffering story from my CEOs. I want to be worth like those Jetson guys, the Googles of the world. I want to be a big digital player. Story of suffering. So you have to tell the opposite. You have to say, I am going to be a big digital player. I am a digital player. In fact, truth of the matter is, I tell all my clients, you are a big data company. They go, where's the data? I go, well, that's a different story. But you've been all these years talking to customers and employees. You've been having conversations. They also said to me, can you come talk to my wife? I sometimes forget my wife's children's names. It's my 3rd. No, seriously, you're a big data player. You know who these people are. It's just that we haven't put any resources against it. So let's define ourselves as a big data player. And the example of a great storytelling was Lou Gerstner, my boss at IBM. He comes from McKinsey, goes to IBM and tells a new story. We're going to be a services firm. We're not going to be Big Blue anymore. We're going to be a services firm. We're going to tell the story of services. Remember, he says, if you remember when he joined, he was around, we're not going to do strategy. We don't need to do strategy. We're going to tell a story. He told the story of services. Then he said, no, we're going to tell a new story when e-commerce came out in 2001. We're going to tell the story of the smarter planet. Just tell a story. And what's his newest story? Anybody who watched this weekend's, Masters? Anybody watch Masters this weekend? What story was IBM telling all weekend long? What were their commercials? Cloud big data. I mean, got every commercial, cloud big data, cloud. And what was so great about their storytelling is they were explaining how cloud big data can be applied in your business. It wasn't big thoughts on cloud big data. It was, here's the example, how. Tell a new story. Next one. You got to put the right person on the bus. Jim Collins, right? Great idea. Put the right person on the bus. Good to great. Now, here's the problem. I don't think many of us are driving buses anymore. And I don't see bus drivers as being useful when you're going to Mars, right? My son works at SpaceX going to Mars. You need astronauts today. And a lot of my companies have bus drivers trying to take their company into the big data space, right? So you need to think, what is my bus going to look like if it's going to be a new story? If I'm going to be in a big data world, I'm going to be a digital player. I'm going to basically collect this data, have relationships with my customers. Who are these people that can get me there? Do I have them on my team? Have they driven these types of vehicles before? Because if they haven't, then I'm going to be driving a bus. And buses don't go 1,000 miles an hour. They go 30. So we need to find the right people to put on the bus. I have a new client, which I absolutely adore. He calls me last week and says, Barry, I am tired of being a Flintstone. I thought he was kidding me. He says, I have securitized, monetized, collateralized, acquiretized assets my whole life, 1 billion of them. I am so tired of it, I want to be a Jetson. So what does that really mean? Well, then you have to look at your team and say, do I have Jetsons or Flintstones? And nothing wrong with Flintstones or Jetsons, right? They're both good, but they think differently. So that means to get a Jetson on a team, you have to look at your whole team. Now it says, I can't bring in only Jetsons, not enough Jetsons in the world. Otherwise, you can all hire your kids, right? They're all Jetsons, right? You look at your kids, they're all Jetsons. We're still all Flintstones. So we got to bring some young Jetsons the way they did at Starbucks. He specifically said, Schultz says, I'm going to look for a woman under 30 who's a social media guru. He did Claire Shuri from Hearsay Social. That's what he did. He brought in someone different. So you look at your team and say, I'm going to train them. I can't bring in only Jetsons. I've got to train the people I have. I've got to make this part of my objective to bring these people, all the people I love, into this world. And what you're doing today is part of your journey, right? To understand the history of why digital is so important, why this is important, as people say, it is the biggest revolution since the Industrial Revolution. It is the new platform for manufacturing. 3D printing is a reality, and Google does print pasta for lunch. You print your own pasta at Google. That's what you want, you print it. So you have to start educating people. And the last thing is you have to experiment with small stuff. You do not start big and grow big. You got to start small, you iterate, you experiment, you add to it, but everything is tiny. You start with things like customer service, for feedback, for employee engagement, for marketing and for sales. Everything is small and tiny because the immune system of organizations is profound. It basically expels anything that is new in every organization. They are amazing. Absolutely, the immune system, if leaders don't realize it, is profound. All my organizations have PTSD. And you might say, how's that possible? Because every time we try something new, they go, oh, but this, like, seriously, no more PTSD. So, given we have PTSD, all of us, from all the years we've worked in business and how we've been dealt with, we need to start small and begin to create new immune systems in our organizations that allow us to inculcate and to find new ways of being. If you think about the railways, they didn't see things like fiber optics, and FedEx didn't see things like drones. So let me leave you with the steps before we finish. What I'd like to leave you is that there's a simple 4-step process for you to get into the digital age. And remember, digital is every part of your being. If you're not digital, you're not understanding its profound nature. It is part of who we are. It is part of our reality. It is the virtual representation of our human existence. It is the neuroplasticity of the way we think. It is the connective tissue of all of us as humans. It is much more profound than the tactics that organizations ask you about. And just prove it yourself. When you go back to your organizations, ask anybody in your organization, do we know everything about our customers? Do we have a map of our ecosystem? How do we connect to our ecosystem? How big is our ecosystem? How does that ecosystem function? What is the sentiment and engagement of the ecosystem? And if we did think that way, what would our economics look like? And the ecosystem includes everything from alumni to prospects to parents and children. They are massive, and we all have them. So one, what I would suggest all of you should organize a boot camp to make sure you have a real dialogue, a focused dialogue, and what does it mean for us to be a digital organization? No matter whether you make things, whether you services, whether you're a technology company, or if you're looking for a network, what does it look like for us? How do we understand it? And I mean in our systems, not as something when we all go back to work, it's just another social media tweet. Then, create a business plan, one that allows you to fundamentally think, what are we going to do to begin this journey to become a digital organization, to be part of this digital world? 3, assess the team. What's the digital DNA look like? Do you have digital board members? Do you have digital executives? Do you have digital professionals? Do you do reverse mentoring, right? I make sure, and there are people in the room who know this, right? From this morning alone, I have someone here that's going to reverse mentor my CEO, 23 and 55, because it's part of our DNA to understand that our kids are teaching us lessons. Well, they're not just teaching us lessons at home, they're teaching us lessons at work as customers. They're forcing on us things that we would have never imagined. So part of that is basically making sure that you assess your team. Then you need to recruit a digital leader. And I don't mean a CTO or CIO. I mean a digital leader, someone who's going to take the business and shepherd the business into the digital world. And then you need to build the digital business. It's a standard process. Everybody can do it. Everybody has the quote-unquote assets to do it. And everybody should do it. So you know the old expression of insanity, which is trying to be a digital business but going back to work and doing the exact same thing. Right? There's no milestones, there's no waypoints, things like that. So Einstein was right. So here's what I'd like you all to do. I'd like you to all stand up again, please. Now, when we started this session, I asked you all to introduce yourself as if you were physical beings without connections, without relationships, without knowledge of each other in your connective tissue as part of the digital world. Now I want you to introduce yourself as best friends, as family members who have just reconnected again. You're happy to see as family members. Family members you're happy to see again, that you know that after this event, Steve and his team are going to do the best to keep you all connected so you can ask each other questions so you know you're here to support each other. Because think about the power of these 200 people. Think about the diversity of your skills. Think about how many answers exist to questions you have. Think about the gift that Odgers gave each and every one of us for organizing this event. Say hello to that person as if they're a long-lost loved one. Now you'll see the difference in the energy when it's all about energy, right? You think about, we could do this for our customers or employees. Please also exchange business cards, right? I want you all to know each other. Please exchange business cards at your table, get to know each other, but you can see the difference. Thank you very, very, very much. Okay, thank you very, very, very much. I want to thank you for attending. And I want you to remember that this is about connections. You can all take a seat. Questions from the group.
It's a gross generalization to say, but digital literacy tends to go down as one goes up the organizational ladder. But the ability to stop the digital path increases. So this role of digital leader, if you could expand a little further and say, what are the capabilities this person must have in order to bridge that divide?
So if I understand your question, what's the capabilities of a leader going forward in this new world?
Yes, as I said, the digital literacy tends to go down as you go up the organization, but the ability to stop that digital pathway goes up.
Yes. So so basically saying the further you go up in the organization, basically leaders are really good at stopping this stuff. And further down the organization, the better they are. There's always digital capabilities and digital leaders in every organization. The leaders stop them, right? It's not like this doesn't exist. I mean, there isn't a single organization I don't walk into, and there's a bunch of youngsters in their 20s who could run the digital initiative, right? What I think is why it's so important that leaders accept our reality, right? That's why I love the debate between Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt. Schmidt was controlling data at Google. Apple was offering technology to everybody. Completely different antithetical models right in the world. You see who's winning. Apple's twice the price, generally, market cap of Google. And go back, Facebook is even more open, right, standards. You have your own data, you have your own data fields, it's unbelievable. I think it's critical for leaders, and all of you are leaders in your right, to go back to your organizations and say, this is critical to us. I know it's frightening. For all my leaders, it is really frightening. They are fearful of losing control because they don't understand the way of thinking, right? They don't. We did a session with one of my CEOs yesterday that's here, and we were going through the different types. We didn't do it today. The research says about the different customer types, which we won't talk about. There's different customer types, phenotypes as well we studied. And new customer types really frighten organizations because they want the right to co-create. And organizations are fearful about the quality of what customers will do. So it's really incredibly important that when you go back, you have to say, as a leadership team, are we frightened by what is happening? And is that fear, which is that resistance to what the world is holding for us, is it stopping us from making progress? It happens in all of our lives, right? And every one of us are fearful about something. We carry all those fears into our current lives, and it stops us from making the progress we want. But my answer to all of you is, as leaders, you've got to begin to experiment here. Next question. Yes?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Barry. I'm Dave Matheson from the CDO Club and the CDO Summit for Chief Digital Officers and Chief Data Officers.
Good to see you.
I want to thank Steve, too, for bringing us all here and for sponsoring us at the BBC last year. Every year at the CDO Summit, which is in 2 weeks at Thomson Reuters, I give a kind of a summary of CDOs who've become CEO and board members. And the interesting stat for you I thought would be interesting would be in 2013, 7 CDOs became CEO and 4 CDOs became board members. Wow. People like Jonathan Miller, who was CDO of News Corp, is now on the BBC's board. Yeah. Rob Norman, Group M, is on the CDO of BBC Worldwide. But my question to you is, there's a Harvard Business Review article that says, do you have the digital leaders you need? And it took a look at the FTSE 500, FTSE 350 and the Fortune 500 and found that only 3% of the Fortune 500 have what they call digitally savvy boards. It seems to me that we're kind of turning a corner because just in the first 2 months of 2015 alone, we've got 7 CDOs became CEO and 7 CDOs became board members, which matches all of 2013. So my question is, do you think we're finally turning a corner in getting CDOs into the C-suite and on boards, and how can companies like Rogers Bernsen help us get there?
So thank you very much. You know, as Steve knows, I can only talk about what I see in the world, right? Which is interesting to me, which is, and there's friends of mine in this room here. I have been giving the same speech as Steve will tell you since, God, 1999 in some shape or form. I am amazed by how many men my age, because I don't have any female CEOs yet, and I have no female board members yet, and I have no female private equity people. I just don't have those clients. I don't see them, right? So I'm amazed by how many guys that are my age, I'm 61, that are literally saying, I don't get it. My kids are now building these new startups. I need to do this in my organization. This is a top priority for me, and it's their initiative, which I find so interesting to me. Because historically they said this is just not going to be important and it's not going to impact my business. So I think we're at the very fringes of where leaders are saying, I am seeing this, I understand it's important, I also understand I don't get it, but I know that this is something we have to do and this has to be about me, which I find is a complete difference from everything else they've ever done. Right? They know if they don't do it personally and they don't own it and they don't fund it, It's not going to happen. So that's a huge difference I'm seeing this year. And they're talking about board positions. They're looking at their board. So I have no, let me give you the real statistics from the conference board where John Spector and I are friends. 6% of boards have, I should say, of boards, only 6% are strategists. Less than 3% are technologists. So most boards who are older white guys than me still don't understand that it's highly risky when you don't have technology and capabilities in this area. Next question. Go for it.
My name's Howard Fish. Steve, when he introduced you, and in your slide you were talking about looking around corners. Digital can't be the end of all of this. Do you spend any time sort of thinking about where, if this economy and if the way that we operate switches to a network digital system, what's going to follow that?
So, yes, so what's the next step after digital? Is that your question? What comes after digital? So I think we all know that answer, right? And that's where I really live. As Steve knows, I'm really not a digital guy. Yes, I'm an expert, but it's not my gig, right? My gig, and how this got started for me, answers that question. My wife was dean of students at Harvard Medical and Dental School in 1993. It was really the history of my suffering and my activities. And my wife was asking me a question in 1993 when Steve was trying to recruit me, why don't guys get it? Now, the first thing I said to her is, excuse me, I think I'm a guy. And it was an interesting question that why would she be asking me why guys don't get it, right? I just couldn't understand her question. She was saying, well, Barry, at Harvard, they don't care about students. They have no idea what the student body name is, no idea who the students are. They don't know who the student parents are. They don't really care about what I do, which is Harvard. She takes care of the entire student body, both financial affairs, student affairs, for the entire Harvard Medical and Dental class. They don't get it, right? It's all about buildings and endowment. And I think in that question is an answer, right? Digital is a virtual representation of our beings. So I think the future, I'm just an optimist, is about the future of humanity, right? That it is not what we see it as currently. We only see the technology currently as being the thing that's disrupting us. I don't think that's right. What Deloitte and I found out is what customers are disrupting businesses. I'm a really big optimist that the greatest wars of all time are religious, over land and property. And the newest research says that if you look what's happening, it says that for the first time ever, our children's generation are actively integrating horizontally. No relationship to city-state, no relationship to religion, no relationship to precedent, no relationship to caste. So my view is for the first time, like our research is showing something, is that we're going to see a longitudinal relationship begin to emerge among humans that we've not seen before. We all grew up in physical locations, but I think the digital world is going to change that entire thing in a very positive way, and will suffer and succeed with everybody. Just my positive view of the world. Next question.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the zero margin issue?
Sure. So Steve says, what about zero marginal cost? Anybody know what that means? So businesses, as we all know, are about profitability. And what companies aren't understanding is that they have a marginal cost of selling something or making something or delivering something. As the internet, as this new platform for communication, commerce, interaction, neuroplasticity, which is how we all interact, begins to connect us, what happens is the marginal cost of making something or owning something, this is frightening for most companies, goes to zero. Now let's talk what that means. If you think about Uber for a second, why does Uber destroy so many companies? So one of my big clients is a Spanish shipping company that owns 80% market share in Spain. And they said to me, Barry, the problem we're running into is we saw FedEx coming. We saw UPS coming. They opened up offices, they came with trucks, they came with planes, they came with drivers. We saw them. Uber, we didn't see them coming. No offices, no people locally, no management team, and 1 million drivers that were the local Spaniards that knew everybody in the community and had time on their hands. The marginal cost of growth for Uber is 0. The marginal cost for FedEx and UPS is extremely high. So we as investors are not yet fully appreciating the new marginal cost business of growth for companies that are using mobile apps to connect one another, to change the economics of our society, and I would argue are creating a cap on our inflation. Next question. Go for it. Yep.
In light of this, you know, he's running a $200 billion company that today gets 95% of its revenue from making things.
Yep.
Is he in trouble?
So I would say he's not, because he understands what I'm going to suggest is what we were talking about today is portfolio theory. So here's a piece of research we did as well. Obviously, this is all cutting edge for the way we've been taught business, right? The way we've been taught business is I'm going to compete with you, basically zero on, zero off, win, lose, you know, all that standard stuff we all grew up with, right? I don't think that is our reality anymore today. In the network world, I don't think that's our reality. We can all, or it's called the shared economy. We all have something to share with somebody by which we can ultimately benefit. And we all have the right to keep something in which we can benefit from that. I think what he realizes, he has a massive ecosystem. He's using a device to connect us. It's sort of a means to an end versus AT&T uses it to build more hours. Apple's doing something completely different. They're allowing me to stay connected on my terms with somebody else, and they're giving me more and more tools to allow this. I think he's smart enough. I don't know if he's as smart as Steve Jobs was, but I think he's smart enough to realize that his ecosystem needs to be protected. And my guess is he even knows that it needs to be accelerated globally and using those physical devices to connect each and every one of us. So I'm not surprised he's going to give us George Jetson phones. Who knows what he's going to give us next out of the Jetsons movies that allows us all to be fully connected.
Thank you. I think we promised everybody that they could leave around 1:30. So
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Before you leave, thank you, Barry. I'm going to ask our group chairman, Richard Bogesrolf, who's over here from the UK. He's chairman of the Odgers Berendsen Group, which is a global group. It's actually probably not known in the United States as a brand as much as it is in Europe and overseas, where we are the second largest executive search brand in the world, behind Egon Zehnder by revenues. But Richard's going to just do a couple of minutes of closing remarks, and thank you all for coming.
Well, Steve, thanks for nothing. To be asked to follow such an inspirational speaker who's got so much that's so interesting and so topical to say is a pretty thankless task, because I know that I can't thank him in a way which properly does credit to what I thought was a completely fascinating talk. Though there were moments during that talk when I wasn't sure that I wanted to thank you at all. For example, when you said that service businesses had had their day, you know, we saw ourselves the wrong side of the line there. But then, bit by bit, I saw glimmerings of hope. You mentioned, first of all, the enormous power of networks, and of course, ultimately, our business is in the business of networking. Then, of course, there was you yourself. And what I realized looking at you is that whatever the technologies are, nothing is ever going to replace the power of individuals to influence and change things, whether as leaders or as advisors. And then you came up with that splendid piece of advice that we should all be looking, you didn't actually use the word recruit, but actually we should all be looking to recruit people who can look around corners. And I suspect that none of us have got quite enough people who can look around corners. And whatever the technologies, I see them from the search profession's point of view, not as threats, but as opportunities to make our business infinitely more powerful and infinitely more interesting. And it'll be more interesting and more powerful because what all organizations need to be able to do is to cope with change. And just as you can't expect to get different results if you go on doing the same things, you can't expect to get different results unless you change your people from time to time. And our business is to help you, when you need to find those people who can look around corners and to cope with this immensely exciting digital revolution. I, of course, am even older and just as white as Barry. And I haven't yet discarded my tie, so I don't, I obviously understand this incredibly little, but I do understand that I need people in my business who can understand it, and so do all of us. So anyway, Odgers Berndtson, not a well-known name, I'm very well aware in the US, but we've sort of proved that even in this redundant service industry world, it is possible for a business to grow incredibly fast. I bought the business of Odgers in the UK 15 years ago when it had revenues of $5 million. Odgers around the world now has revenues of $250 million, peanuts compared with Google, but in the search game quite significant. And the reason that we've done that is that we passionately believe in the need to adapt and to do things differently. So if you feel like trying an organization that perhaps you haven't used before, but which is really committed to finding people who can look around corners, give Steve and his team a ring, because they're brilliant. That's it. Thank you all very much for coming.